Alrighty, hello from YouTube Live. I'm Dr. Michelle Fansteel, also known as Dr. HACCP, and I am coming to you today because I had a request from people to go and talk to the general public about what I know about how the food system works and how it doesn't work. And we are going to be having an amazing set of conversations here on YouTube Live. I decided to do it through this channel because this is primarily a consumer based show. And I mostly work with businesses. And so I'm just what basically, I'm going to help folks understand how our food system does and doesn't work. And so I chose YouTube Live as a format. We're going to see how it goes. These are also going to get recorded on my podcast, which is the Smallholder Food Business Development Institute podcast. We're kind of the only show of its kind where we talk about how to run a food business from like a technical perspective and a mindset perspective. So go check it out on your favorite, podcast player. And I release new podcasts every Thursday afternoon, kind of late afternoon, early evening on East Coast time. And it's really fairly amazing. We just recorded our 20th episode. We've had thousands of downloads, and it's kind of unbelievable if you ask me, but it just goes to show you how much people like are dying for this knowledge. And so let me start with some background about who I am. And of course the chat box is open, so if you are interested in growing and scaling your food business, just type grow in the chat box and I will DM you and we'll have a conversation about what that means and how you can get out there. But I started in this business because, let's see here, 10 years ago, now getting on 11 years ago, I had a little baby. And I was actually in northern Jersey. I'm coming to you live from my office in Yarmouth, Maine. But I was in Jersey. And I had landed in Jersey because I was stationed at Fort Monmouth. So I am actually a veterinarian. I went to Wellesley College undergrad. I have an economics degree, and actually I'm a Bachelor of Arts, I guess. I studied with Chip Case and I studied microeconomics. And I also studied geology. And actually in the work that I do, this is both incredibly relevant. And you'll find out as this series continues what I mean by that and how those things come to bear, because that's a lot of like the economic side of it is a lot of what we're going to be talking about, because there's a lot about our food system that if you understand it from a micro and macroeconomic perspective, you can understand how broken it is and some ideas for fixing it. So anyway, I went to Wellesley undergrad. I'm class of '96. We're the incredible class. So Scarlet Spirit, let them hear it, my friends. And from Wellesley, I got a job at an oil company because that's what you do with an economics and geology degree. And I hated it. I really, really loathed it. So I ran away to the Peace Corps. I ran away to the Peace Corps. I was in Jordan for a year, and I really wasn't a great Peace Corps volunteer either, but I'm super proud of my service. I'm very glad that I did it. I worked in a Palestinian refugee camp up in Irbid in Jordan, and I got to meet amazing people and do amazing work, but they didn't really need Peace Corps volunteers. We were there as part of the Clinton peace initiatives, which were totally worth doing, and actually it's kind of funny because what happened was Queen Noor had wanted to be a Peace Corps volunteer when she was a kid. So of course Queen Noor, who's now I guess the Dowager Queen of Jordan, she grew up in the 60s and wanted to be a Peace Corps volunteer, but her father wouldn't let her be a Peace Corps volunteer. So the next best thing is to become regent of your own country and get your own Peace Corps volunteers. And so I will suffice it to say that there is nothing that makes you appreciate democracy like living in a monarchy. And so anyway, that's so I was in the Peace Corps. I actually ended up coming home early. I didn't serve both years. I only served one. I came home, went and licked my wounds in fabulous Cambridge, Massachusetts with my very bestest friends from Wellesley, whom I love very, very much. And in the course of that year, I went and I got a job helping banks and insurance companies get on this newfangled thing called the World Wide Web. So this was back in the first internet boom years. And it was the most depressing job ever. Like I really had no idea what it meant to write PowerPoint presentations 80 hours a week. It was super awesome. And in the course of that, I actually, I had a cat and the cat got sick and I decided I wanted to be a veterinarian. And that meant going to vet school. So I lived in Cambridge, Massachusetts at the time. And if you live in Massachusetts, you have three options for vet school: Tufts, Penn, and Cornell. And of course, you get in-state at Tufts, which gets you, I don't know, maybe a $500 break on tuition. And all three of those schools are super expensive. So remember, economics degree. I didn't want to pay that much money for vet school because I knew even then, so this was just before the turn of the last century, so this was like 99. Even then I knew that I didn't want to be paying off my vet school degree until I retired, and that's unfortunately what's happened with a lot of my colleagues. So I picked up and moved to Georgia. So I went from living next to MIT to living next to Buford, Georgia, living in Buford, Georgia before the Mall of America was built. Let me tell you about culture shock. Okay, I am a returned Peace Corps volunteer. I assure you I'm well familiar with culture shock. It was as much of a culture shock to go to Georgia from Cambridge as it was to go from Connecticut, where I was living before I went to the Peace Corps, to the Middle East. Because putatively in Georgia, we all speak the same language. We do not all speak the same language, my friends, and I have tons of stories from Georgia. But suffice it to say, I got into the University of Georgia vet school, and I loved vet school. I was a great vet student. And I applied for the Health Professions Scholarship Program. And that's how I got into the military. So the year I was admitted to the Health Professions Scholarship Program, I was one of 5 veterinary students across the country that was admitted. And what that meant was that you, the American taxpayer, paid for my vet degree, so thank you very much. In return for that payment, I actually served on active duty for 3 years, and then I had a 5-year reserve commitment. And what that meant was I had to go serve on a base. And I had met my husband while I was in vet school. He lived in New Jersey, and Fort Monmouth came up. And so we picked up and we moved to Fort Monmouth. I didn't live on base, we lived in Freehold. So if you are familiar with my hometown from Bruce Springsteen, that's Freehold. It's the town Bruce Springsteen is from. And of course, we all love the boss, right? So we moved to Fort Monmouth. My husband, we moved to Freehold. My husband moved across the state. He had lived out in Hunterdon County, and everything was fine. There was a lot of change in 1 year, and we didn't need to also have him go find a job. Fort Monmouth was a food inspection station, okay? And that's because it's in Jersey, and the sheer volume of our food that goes through New Jersey is pretty unbelievable. And if you didn't know how much industrialized food goes through New Jersey, you do now. There's so much there. Like, all of our flavorants are made in New Jersey, and those are the things that make your food taste like your food. And I learned how to inspect food in the Army because the U.S. Army Veterinary Corps is the Department of Defense executive agent for food safety. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense, even though most people are like, what? Well, lo these many years ago, the veterinarians, they all traveled with mules, but what did the mules carry? The mules carried the supplies. Okay, and it's an army, as Napoleon tells us, lives and dies on its stomach. Okay, and food supplies, I mean, like, history is rife with armies outstripping their food supplies and failing in whatever mission that they have. Well, in America's Army, it's different. We don't outstrip our food supply, and our food supply is made safe by the eyes and ears of the U.S. Army Veterinary Corps, and it's incredibly important work. Because the other thing, if you think about it, most of the things that make us sick are foodborne illness. Well, by definition, it is foodborne illness, but it's like bacteria and viruses and stuff that come from animals. And what do veterinarians know about bacteria and viruses and animals? And so that's what we do in the Army in large part. We also take care of military working dogs. I was the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey general veterinarian. So I saw all the dogs that worked on the World Trade Center pile, kind of a couple years after the World Trade Center had happened. And then I got posted to the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, up there in the Hudson Valley on the Hudson River, and it's absolutely beautiful. And I was in charge of the U.S. Army mascot mule team. So go Army, beat Navy. And as you watch this and you hear me and see me in December, I always get super excited. We've had several good years as an Army football team. It's been pretty amazing. So I love Army football, and so I'm a big Army fan, and it's a lot of fun. So and I live in Maine, which is of course mostly Navy, but it's all okay. We all get along. So anyway, so what ended up happening is I got pregnant and I had a baby in 2008. I can't believe that baby is about to be 11. And my baby was allergic to dairy and soy, which is super unusual. Like fewer than 1% of babies are allergic to dairy and soy. And so of course, being an upper middle class white woman, I was trying to breastfeed because that's what we do. And I had to try and find food that was not full of dairy and soy. Well, I lived in the middle of industrialized food. New Jersey may be called the Garden State, but it was not the Garden State where I lived. And I would like go even to the local grocery store, like the local Italian grocery store, and I'd ask for like soy-free mayonnaise, and they'd be like, "What the hell are you talking about?" So my husband and I actually started making all of our own food so I could know what I was eating. And it was it was like super important to me to be able to nurse and to have that connection with my kid, even though I was not great at nursing. I'm a terrible pregnant person, but we did what we could, right? But through trying to find dairy and soy free foods and learning what I was learning as I went and I did these food inspections. So like I have inspected everything from the M&M factory in Hackettstown, New Jersey, all the way down to the caterers for Fort Hamilton, and the food trucks at Fort Hamilton. Like I mean, small, large, in between, meat, poultry, fish, everything. I've inspected absolutely everything for the U.S. Army. And I realized as I was doing this work that that local food really needed somebody who understood food inspection, because the other thing that I was taught as a veterinary corps officer was how to write food safety plans, because I had to teach my soldiers how to write, read, and understand food safety plans, so they had to teach it to me. And so I knew at that point how to read HACCP plans, how to create HACCP plans, and how to audit HACCP plans. And so a HACCP plan is a system of food safety that we use in meat and poultry and fish. And then we have a system that's an awful lot like it over in like breads and pastries and things like that. And that's called preventive controls. And I realized that the whole world around food safety was changing, and we were getting third-party audits, and we were getting so those are things like SQF and BRC after the and this was the time of the spinach scare, when little kids were dying because they were eating raw spinach that their moms were cooking for them or not cooking for them actually, and serving because they felt it was a really super healthy food. And this was about the time when we were figuring out that raw leafy greens have some super big problems in America. And that was a lot of the genesis of something called the Food Safety Modernization Act. And the Food Safety Modernization Act has really been a landmark change over on FDA regulated foods. And I'm gonna, as this kind of series goes on, I'm going to talk about what it means to be FDA regulated, USDA regulated, all that sort of stuff. But right now, I want to just give you some background. And so in the midst of all of this, as I was trying to feed my family, I read The Omnivore's Dilemma. We're looking at, how our food choices like impact the world, how our lifestyle choices impact the world. Like I was the only mother I knew who was both breastfeeding and using cloth diapers. This was not a popular option in New Jersey in 2008 and 2009 when I was having my kids. And what we decided is we didn't want to raise the kids in Jersey, and we had lost our shirts on our house. We bought a house in 2006 in Jersey, and I don't think it's still recovered its value. And we took the rest of the money we picked up and we moved to Maine. And we couldn't have made a better decision. I absolutely love it here. And I gave myself 2 years, because at that point I was out of the service. I was trying to do laboratory animal medicine. And in the Great Recession, laboratory animal medicine fell apart. Like when I graduated from vet school, you could write your own ticket as a laboratory animal veterinarian. And by the time I was out of the service and looking for a job doing monkey medicine, I'm a trained monkey veterinarian. By the time I was looking for a job, there were like literally no jobs to be had. And if you can't get a job as a lab animal vet in New Jersey, there are no jobs out there. And so we picked up and we moved to Maine. And here I am. We moved here in 2006. I'd been out of vet school for 6 years at that point, and I was miserable. I'm not great at clinical medicine. I can't do surgery because my hands shake. I have an intention tremor, which is not a fun thing to find out when you're actually in your graduate program and you want to be a surgeon. I can't throw sutures. I try and throw a suture and I end up in Wisconsin. It's ridiculous. So I gave myself 2 years to be happy as a veterinarian, and I started this business. I started Dirigo Food Safety to help local food producers cope with regulations and market expectations. And I started writing HACCP plans. And my business started when the largest organic cattle rancher in Maine came up to me at the Maine Ag Trade Show and said, "Hey," in this beautiful old Maine accent, "Hey, I hear you could write a HACCP plan." Yep, sure can. Can I pay you to write me my HACCP plan? Yep, sure can. And thus my business was born. So we've been 100% customer funded since our inception, which is pretty incredible. And we just passed our 7-year mark. And I am basically a $500,000 business. I am growing to $1 million this year, and I aim to be a $1 billion business by 2043. And I'm doing that not only through consulting, I'm also a coach. So I am a life coach and a business coach because I believe that it's not perfect paperwork that is separating our foodpreneurs from success. It is their mindset. Okay. So I live and breathe food manufacturing. I work for some of the most impressive local food manufacturers, and it is my privilege to work for them, and I love my clients like you wouldn't believe, and I can't believe I get to do this work and bring these amazing products out to the consumer. But what's super interesting is I know so much about how the food industry works. And so I've decided to start this series to bring all of this information to you, the consumer. Okay. And so I have I have 10 topics that we're going to talk about. And the next time we talk, we're going to talk about raw milk. Okay. And we're going to talk about public health and raw milk because I am in my core a public health practitioner, but I'm also an economist, and we can have some super interesting conversations about what that means. So if you have a topic that you'd like me to cover, by all means, leave a note in the comments, all right? And I will cover that topic. All right, we're going to start with raw milk, and then we're going to talk about cannabis and hemp and the difference and what does all that stuff mean, and are you getting what you think you're getting? Because I get so many questions from consumers about that stuff. I also do all of this work in the cannabis field because I think that my friends who rely on medical marijuana deserve not to get salmonella or botulism or Staph aureus toxicity or really, aggravate a food allergy. So I'll explain what all of that stuff means. So welcome. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Leave questions, and I look forward to talking to you as we get through this. Have a great day, everybody.